In this demo, I would like to explore Oracle connector that is available for Openflow. We'll go over what is Oracle connector for CDC on the Openflow. Let us quickly go to the ingestion section and click on the Openflow. When you click on that, it will give you a home page of Openflow. It talks about what is Openflow and its key benefits. Our focus is more on going over the Oracle CDC for this demo. Let's click on the launch Openflow. When it launches, it will prompt for the Openflow username and password. Have it saved, and then I'm going to give my authenticator app code for this particular trail account that I'm using. Once I input that, the code that is generated, so I'm going to log into Openflow. We talked about the deployments and runtimes in the past. I'm going to use a small runtime or a medium runtime for this demo, but both of them are in suspended mode. But before I do that, let me activate the medium connector for this demo. While it is being activated, let's go to the overview section and see what are the connectors available from a database side. As we talked about, I have Oracle Independent License Connector, which is the replicate Oracle data by bringing your own existing Oracle Golden Gate license, which is bring your own license model. But going over the Snowflake documentation, like when you click on the documentation here, so you have an option to choose embedded license, which is Snowflake provided, or independent license, bring your own license, BYOL. So in this case, I only have Oracle Independent License Connector because this is being a trail account. But if you have a Golden Gate license already available for your Oracle database, and you can choose bring your own license. So, and the corresponding billing compliance and usage is given here in the documentation. And the one that I'm going to choose is right now is the Oracle Independence License Connector. So, but you also have an embedded license. Embedded license means if you don't have a Golden Gate license, you can leverage Snowflake offering of embedded license connector. And when you choose that, it says here activation initiates a non-cancelable 36 months term after 30-day trial. So which means for about 30 days, you can use the license and then you can do your POCs, or if it works fine, then you can go to a committed 36 months post term. So you'll be committed to pay 36 months for the license, which is part of an embedded license. But one thing that we have to note here is when you choose a license for the Golden Gate, it is only needed an Extreme API out of the box from the Golden Gate. You don't need anything else. So it is a lightweight Extreme API that is needed, and the cost is relatively less if you go with embedded license. Let's see if our the runtime is activated. I'll go back and check for my runtime, and my medium runtime here, demo SPCS runtime, is activated. I'll click on the runtime and let me see if I can pull in Oracle connector. I'll keep this one aside, and then the way you can install that is you can choose from overview page, go to the connectors and click on the database and just install onto your runtime. So, but when you do that, it says replicate Oracle data by bringing your own existing Oracle Golden Gate license. The terms required to install this connector, additional terms need to be accepted. your org admin will need to navigate to the terms page of admin menu in Snowsite in an org admin enabled account. So this account is not enabled. I want to explore whether I can pull that from import registry while uh, to just to go over the connector. So I'm going to just click on import registry here, and under the connector registry client I have different connectors, and when I click on the flow I will see if I have Oracle connector available. Let's see if we have anything starting with O. Yeah. So interesting that I don't see the Oracle connector here, because as the documentation says that argadmin has to provide and accept the terms before I use the Oracle connector. So I don't see anything specific to Oracle in this case. Let's see. Okay, so I don't have it here. Now the way to approach is I will see if how can I use an argadmin in this case. So I have an argadmin. I'll go to argadmin role, and if I go to the snow site, choose an argadmin role, right, which is my trail account, and then go to the projects, go to the admin page, and under the terms, Openflow for Oracle is there, right? I'll click on here. So terms, it says Snowflake Marketplace is there, and then Openflow is there. I'm going to review this, and then before I click on accept. So there are terms that I did not even go over at the moment, but I want to see how the connector looks like, so I'll accept for the moment. So I've accepted using argadmin role, and now I'm going to go back, change my role to Openflow admin, and then go to the connectors here, click on the Openflow admin, and click on the databases, and when I click on the install, so maybe I would have to log out and log back in. Let's see, I'll log out and back to Snowsite, and I'll click on the I'll close these sessions for a moment, and then click on the ingestion portion, click on Openflow, launch Openflow. When I do the launch, it again took me to the Openflow homepage, and then I go to the connectors, click on the database, and now I have an install option. So what we did so far is I was able to accept the terms via argadmin role. And here, replicate Oracle database by bringing your own existing Oracle Golden license. In this case, bring your own license. I don't have a license, but I want to explore on the connector. What are the options that it has, and some details about the connectors. Let's click install. When I do that, it is prompting me which runtime I should use. Right now, I have activated the demo SPCS runtime medium. So, manage available runtimes here. I go here and it is set to active. Let us see if I can pull it from import registry, and then go to Oracle independent license, click import, right? So I have my connector here. I was using MySQL for a different test, but in this case I have my Oracle connector here. When I click on this, what are the options that I have? So this is an Oracle bring your own license, independent license, right? Not the embedded one. So it has a snapshot load. It has an incremental load process group. It has metrics that goes in here that captures the metrics Then it also has stream staleness prevention. So this process group helps to avoid any staleness while it is streaming, right? So let us see on a high level, if I understand correctly from the documentation, this connector means it is wrapping up multiple sub process groups. Each process group has a particular flow involved that includes processors and their connections and right end-to-end flow. So in this case, if you take a look at, you zoom in, right, you have, this is a snapshot load, which means the initial load for a particular table, and the flow includes fetching the data from generate the flow file, and then use the multi-database list tables. What are the tables that are there that are provided, and then pick tables for replication. It chooses based on what are the tables that we provide, and register new tables for replication, and then perform snapshot load. So again, there is a process group involved. I'll double click on this one. Again, there is a heavy flow involved here. So I'm going to again zoom in. So what do we have here? It's going to start from input and then fetch source table schema, check if primary key is present, add Snowflake specific columns if there are any, and then determine the destination object, and then apply object identifier resolution, create Snowflake schema, check if it is configured to skip any snapshots. That means if I want to load only the incremental, it will check whether I have to load full load or incremental based on this check. And then go to the create Snowflake table and then wait for the incremental load to begin, and then remove the Snowflake specific columns if there are any. Check if it is configured to skip snapshot load. So if you take a look at, there are multiple again processors underneath. So if I have to design this whole flow, it takes several days for sure. So what is important to understand in this case is I have snapshot load process group here. When I click on Oracle process group, I have multiple process group. Each performs either a full load or incremental load, and also validates if there is a stale streams that are present that it can prevent, right? So let's go back here one step. This is an Oracle connector. With this particular connector, one single process group, I was able to achieve full load, incremental load, and there is a process how CDC works in Snowflake for the Openflow. So with this simple connector, I am going to explore different parameters. Like I'll take a look at configure controller services parameters, and then how you can do version control with this, right? And then getting into the group like via the click or the hyperlink, and how to start and stop a processor, how to enable and disable to update the parameter context, right? How to enable and disable the controller services, and then how to check the view status history of this particular process group, and then I can align this, and also the way to download this particular flow file definition if I want to move it to a higher environment or another runtime for me to test. And there is an option to empty all the queues if there is any processors that are running, and if the queue is accumulated with the data, right? So let us explore each option. Under the configure, the settings, the name of the particular process group, and then there are certain parameter contexts that are available. So in this case, Oracle ingestion parameters is enabled, and that is a default. Execution engine is says inherited, but there are other options called standard stateless. I do not know much about this, but this is a default execution engine that is enabled. We can explore more on this on my next session. It also says process group flow file concurrency unbounded. You have single flow file per node, single batch per node. but by default it is set as unbounded. We can explore in detail on what each configuration means. Process group outbound policy stream when available. So it's like under the hood, it streams the data that it sees some redo logs in Oracle end. So it also says default flow file expiration, default back pressure object threshold, default back pressure data size threshold. So these are some typical streaming related configurations that the process group has. And in the comments it says just a version. So I'll cancel this here. I'll go back again. We went over the configure. Primarily, we change that configuration to change the name of the connector. In this case, let's see if we can change it to Oracle demo connector CDC, right? Let's see if I can apply here. So the name is changed. Let's see controller services. What is a controller service? For Oracle demo connector, I see JSON reader is there, JSON writer is there, and then Oracle connection pool is there, Snowflake connection pool is there, Snowflake private key service is there, source table schema registry is there, table column filter is there, table state store is there. What is a controller service? Controller service typically are some of the reusable components that can be leveraged across different process groups. So in this case, we have JSON reader and writer. Typically, when a flow file moves from one processor to other processor, it needs to have an understanding of what is the language that it has to use. So I think the reader and writer is defined as JSON in this case. And there are connection settings related to Oracle and Snowflake are also provided. And what is a private key service from Snowflake side? And source table schema registry if there are any tables that are registered. Table column filter. Table column filter means what columns you want to include and what columns you want to exclude. There is an option for that. And table state store, I think that is important because if which means, for example, if you take a look at view state, I don't have anything at this moment. Let me also explore edit. When I do the edit, and it has its own ID for the controller service and type is multi-database standard tables state service, and it has its some supports controller service. It is more to do with some Java components here, but click on the properties. It denotes like if I click add and say like a table name and click OK. So you have an option to add a parameter in this case and I can validate, right? So this particular uh, table state store controller service means it is going to check all the tables that are relevant for this particular uh, CDC, right? And it's going to check whether the state of the table. Let's go back a step. So we went over the configure and we went over the controller service. Let's see what we have in parameter context. So if I cancel this, I have two processors. Let me focus only on Oracle for this moment. Oracle destination parameters, Oracle ingestion parameters, Oracle source parameters. So there are three different parameters context that I have received. Let us explore more on what each parameter context will have. So when I click on edit, in the parameter context of destination parameters, I have a destination database name, schema pattern, and account identifier, Snowflake manage, standard, Snowflake private key file and password. So if you take a look at this is all specific to the Snowflake, which is the destination connection details. And I will cancel this and see what are the ingestion parameters that we have to provide. It says column filter JSON. This means what columns I should be including or excluding. So there is a way to provide that in a JSON file. Destination database, it is no value set. It picks up from destination parameters. So there is a destination schema that it picked up. and included table names, what tables it needs to include, what, and you can also provide a table regex if you want. The ingestion type in this case is full, which means it's going to do the full snapshot. But if the table is already existing and full snapshot is already done, it's going to do incremental based on its identifier to journal tables. And there is a cron schedule that is given. And let's see if we have, there are objects, identifier resolution, oracle connection, right? So this is all JDBC connection related to the driver and oracle password, if it needs an SSL mode, and the username, and different parameters related to snapshot fetching strategy. These are some defaults that are already provided. The documentation doesn't state to update any of this, but it is important to understand extreme out server name here, extreme position, which is latest, extreme out server name. We will have to generate a server name, extreme out server URL, and we will have to put an extreme out URL, in this case JDBC Oracle OCA, and the host name and the database name. So why it is needed? Because it is the way it uses Extreme API to read the redo logs that are generated out of the Oracle, and with that change, the connector is able to identify there is a change, and it's gonna run the CDC process. Let us see what we have in Oracle source parameters. I click on edit and see I have an Oracle correct connection, JDBC driver needed, the corresponding password, username, and extreme out server name and extreme out URL. So these are important to understand, to have the source parameters and the ingestion parameters and destination parameters. So we were able to cover some important aspects of configuration, control services, parameters. And we can talk about version controlling in another session. So it is an easier approach. You just have to create your GitHub or GitLab or whatever the Git repository accounts, and then you start version control and check in all of the local changes to the Git repo. And there is a way you can import the flow definition from another runtime, or if you want to import one of your versions that are working, you can always import via version control. And there is a way to start and stop the processor groups, and so there is a way to stop and disable and enable controller services. When you are updating controller services, it is important to disable first and then enable. And then we can also check the history. In this case, we don't have rest of the like I don't have anything updated to download the profile, but there is an option for you to download the flow definition. So with that, we covered the technical side of Oracle CDC, but what it needs in general is it needs an extreme API that needs to be set up via Golden Gate at Oracle end, and then once the logs are generated via Extreme API, this CDC connector, it will interact with Oracle database Extreme API logs, and then streams the data into Snowflake. It uses journal tables for all the incremental changes that are coming in, and it also needs a warehouse to merge data from journal tables to the destination table. So but you would also need a runtime to have this connector, and runtime, it is recommended to have a medium size runtime with one single node, so that you will not see a typical out of memory issues for larger workloads. So it is important to understand all of these changes. So let us see on a high level, if we can quickly take a look at the documentation. So we went over the connector for Oracle, and then the use case is typically replicate Oracle database tables into Snowflake for comprehensive centralized reporting. Why you need a replication? Because you needed that data to be leveraged for your decision making or insights. Licensing model, we talked about it. And so there is more elaboration here in the documentation about how you can just use the licensing model. And so what are some considerations and how it is built, right? And the configuration, how do you configure? Typically a DBA needs to be involved from an Oracle side to enable the Extreme API. And there are additional details about the post-term renewal penalties and requirements, restrictions, right? And configuration. All of that are present in the Snowflake documentation. Here, if you take a look at what are the Oracle versions that are supported, currently it supports Oracle database version 12CR1 and later, and on-premise servers, Oracle Exadata, OCI VM bare metal, AWS custom RDS for Oracle only, AWS standard single tenant RDS for Oracle. So these are the only Oracle versions that are currently supported. There are limitations. There are many limitations. I think it doesn't support AWS multi-tenant RDS. Oracle Autonomous Database are not supported. Some of the SaaS offerings on Oracle Fusion Cloud are not supported. So there are few limitations. If your Oracle database doesn't have primary key, it cannot be replicated. So these are not supported. And if there is any value in Oracle column that is larger than 16 MB, it is not supported because it is considered as an oversized value, and Snowflake doesn't fit into this category. So typically you will not have any column with size 16 MB. So it won't fit if it is under CDC model. And how the connector works, the tables are replicated. First it will evaluate the schema inspection to see if there are any changes with the schema, like column renames or column additions or partitions. And then it'll do an initial snapshot using snapshot load processor group, and then you have an incremental load once the initial load completes. And the table replication status can also be validated via controller services. A table listing controller services will be displayed, and go to the table state store, click for more options and check for a particular table, and you can view the state of that particular table. Typically you will see if it is new, a table is scheduled for replication, but replication hasn't started, it will say new. Otherwise snapshot replication will be enabled for the connector is copying existing data. It'll say snapshot replication. The status displays until all the records are stored in destination table. If it displays incremental replication, that means it is incrementally loading the replicating the data. And there are chances that it can also be in failed state. So if it is in failed state, you would have to carefully understand the failure. Sometimes or many a times you would have to remove the table and then let the connector flow and stop the connector and then fix the source problem and then redo the whole refresh and then update the connector to incremental once your full load is completed to solve that or fix the issue. So it is important to understand the data retention. Connector follows a data retention philosophy where customer data is never automatically deleted. So when a table is created, if there is a row that is deleted, there will be a soft delete record in destination, which means there will be a column with the delete flag set to true. If the column is dropped in the destination table, you won't see that column is dropped, but you would see a renamed column. Similarly, journal tables are retained indefinitely, and there can be tasks that you can schedule to clean them up if you do not use journal tables for your change capture. But it is important to use journal tables as long as your replication is running. So you see some metadata related to inserted, updated, and soft delete, right? And so it is similar with the dropped columns and renamed columns. Primarily, CDC supports schema evaluation. That is why you see if a column is dropped, it will still continue to support. And the way you approach that, if a column is dropped, is do some transformation on top of your destination table using queries or case statements by understanding the column that is dropped and the column that is newly is coming, or the column that is renamed and the new column that is coming. In that way, so there is a better way of handling things after the CDC is done and replication is done. You have further transformation that you can do going forward. So let's talk about journal tables. Journal tables are typically used for incremental replication, which means they retain all the changes. And under the hood, Snowflake uses Snowpipe streaming to load the changes into journal tables. And journal tables will be the reference, and it will be the data in journal tables will be merged against the destination table via merge command, and that is when you need a warehouse that is set up. So it is it is good to understand what kind of the warehouse sizing that you need based on the kind of or the volume of data that it is generating. So it is important to understand journal tables. And how do you manage the journal table storage? Journal table storage is there is a cost involved, obviously, for storing the data in Snowflake. And if you want, you can clear up the old data, and you can create some tasks, Snowflake tasks that periodically cleans up journal tables for tables that are no longer being replicated. Before implementing any cleanup, always verify if you are not replicating the table associated for those journal tables. And so it is important to understand before you clean up those journal tables. And there are some the terms and agreements to enable and manage commercial terms for Openflow connector. We talked about having prerequisites of accepting some terms via argadmin role, and then also talk about the license setup. And there is a way the instructions are given on how to set up if it is bringing your own license, and how what are the instructions that needs to be done at database, and if it is an independent license, what are the instructions for database administrator to enable some configurations. On the data mapping side, it is important to understand the data type in Oracle is mapping to what data type in Snowflake. And the Snowflake Oracle to Snowflake migration has been happening from several years. So it is, I think most of the people who are on Oracle understands this mapping because it is pretty straightforward. Snowflake has its own data types and it has similar data types in Oracle, so they map without any issue. So there are some tasks that needs be done for Openflow connector for Oracle. So you do some prerequisites. We talked about having a, a deployment and then having a runtime and then creating the connector, right? So it is important to understand the size of your runtime and whether you want the deployment to be a Snowflake deployment or bring your own cloud deployment. So understand more on what your organization prefers. There is also uh, configure the Oracle database. How do you configure Oracle database, right? How do you configure um, the retention period for archived redo logs? Here there are some commands that Snowflake documentation has. How do you enable extreme and supplemental logging so that those changes, the redo logs, can be retrieved via extreme API through the connector? And there are some SQL steps that are given here. It is important to understand all of them. And a DBA who has an admin permissions has the required grants to enable the Extreme API on the Oracle database. So the way you to do it is to create an Extreme system administrator, use that administrator and do all the create and alter table space related commands that would help to enable the Extreme API. It is also important to grant required permissions to the extreme administrator privileges to the required user, where the user you'll be using an Oracle CDC connector. If you take a look at, you have some of the details related to grantee, the privilege type. So these are important to understand and then run them in Oracle database. So this is primarily a DBA task where capture all of these particular settings and run them to set up an Extreme API configuration that will be leveraged for CDC. So I'll quickly go down. There are several steps that are needed um, for setting up an Extreme API. And on the Snowflake side also, you would have to create a database and then create a user and then use that user to log into Openflow and then create required permissions on the database, right? Grant required permissions on the database and also grant required permissions on the runtime and also create a warehouse that is needed for merge and give appropriate permissions to Snowflake role that it is running and then use if you want to programmatically access that, leverage an RSA public key for that particular Snowflake user and set up this RSA keys to access the Snowflake database. The very end, configure the connector. We already see how to configure a connector. We went over different parameters in that connector. So in this documentation, each parameter and the corresponding description is given. So it is easy to go over that. It is important to go over that to understand an end-to-end flow of a connector. So with that, we've covered the Oracle connector. There is one documentation related to setting up incremental replication without snapshots. We talked about it. There is a particular feature where ingestion type in the process group set to incremental to only load the incremental data if I want to skip the full snapshot. And there are steps to understand how to do the maintenance, like reinstalling the connector and then setting up some replication tables if I want, stop the processor, right? Set the tables that I want to replicate, and then understand what is there in the queues, right? I think there are some maintenance steps that are given here that it is important to understand before setting up the connector. So I think the documentation seemed very thorough, and there is also a way to troubleshoot connector. So I would say definitely go over this documentation if you are planning to use Oracle connector for CDC using Openflow. That is a data integration service offering from Snowflake. So in a nutshell, what we have covered is Openflow connector, Oracle connector for CDC on Openflow, and what are the different licenses and how the connector works typically in Openflow, and then corresponding the roles that needs to be defined in the source area and in the destination side, and then what are the warehouse sizing that you need, and then different runtimes that supports this Oracle and different versions that are supported. What are the key constraints and limitations that are defined in the documentation? So this is important to understand various parameter contexts and controller services to understand what parameters that needs to be input and how the controller services works and how you can filter different columns or tables and replicate the data from Oracle source to Snowflake as the destination. With that, I'm going to end the session. This is all about Oracle CDC connector on Openflow.